because it's actually a radio and it runs it down. So at any rate, so one, the correct answer then is C. And this one's going to start out without audio, but it's going to click in because I just turned the mic on. I don't know. Different tests have different numbers that come out, or selections that come out the most frequent for that test. I don't think overall you can predict anything. I used to teach at Hartford Community College, and we had some off-campus satellite classes at Aberdeen Proving Ground, and so I'd have a class of maybe 80% full-time military people, and basically on Army tests they used to say their going motto was "When in doubt, Charlie out." Charlie standing for the letter C. You know, so the going wisdom was that the correct answer was C more often than any other. I don't know if you can predict that on my tests. But anyway, number two, we only looked at a little bit of the apology, but he argues that the unexamined life is not worth living. Well, how many people thought it was that? Well, B, wisdom through philosophy is to be sought only after one finds wealth. C, inner goodness is impossible since all people are selfish. D, confidence in our own wisdom is the true goal of philosophy. So how many thought it was A? Okay, how many thought B? C? D? Yeah, it's A. You know, again, they're not all going to be this easy, but you know, there are reasons why these are not good, and I'm not going to go into them. Socrates says he taught the youth of Athens to care most for the state of their soul and to be a good person, and to put that as primarily important and as less than caring for the state of their bodies and whether they have a good job and wealth. Socrates was not against wealth, but he said, let your priority first be to be a good person, and things like wealth and a good job and stuff, that stuff will follow. But get your priorities straight. And he says, this is what I really taught the youth of Athens, to care most for the state of their souls. And he says, if that's corrupting them, then I guess I'm corrupting them. But nobody thought he had corrupted them except the prosecutors. No one testified against him that he had corrupted them. 3, blank, fill in one of these names, held that because we're subject to the necessary and immutable laws of nature, we do not make genuinely free choices. Well, here, was it Descartes? Well, we don't know. We haven't studied Descartes yet. But you can say, well, okay, Descartes I'm not sure about. B, Augustine. Well, can you eliminate Augustine? Well, we just read, we read an essay where he's arguing for free will. So you know it's not Augustine, because he thinks we do make free choices. But now Paul-Henri de Holbach, we just looked at an essay last time where he argues basically this thesis that we're all subject to nature's laws, and as such, we can never make really free choices. So it turns out to be de Holbach here. See, George Berkeley, again, we haven't looked at. Most of the distractors are going to be more plausible than some of the ones. A distractor is what people who make up tests call wrong choices. Okay. I once sat on a committee that made up a national ethics test. There's one that the Dante's program gives that allows somebody to get a full semester's credit in college ethics by taking that test, as long as you're in an institution that accepts it. You know. So at any rate, you learn a lot about, you know, technical things. I mean, they gave us train tickets, and we went up to the place in New Jersey, you know, where they also make up things like the SAT and the ACT. But anyway, to get back to this, 5, allegory of the cave in Plato's allegory of the cave, myth of the cave, parable of the cave. Think of those all as, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. All right. But think of those as being interchangeable. For according to the Holbach, we're all condemned to be free. Well, now, even if we haven't read Sartre, you could look at this and pretty much know that is it true or false. Well, if we're condemned to be free, he's saying that somehow we are free and we have no choice in the matter. But is it the Holbach's view that we're free? No. I mean, he doesn't think we're free for one instant of time. So, you know, so it must be false. You know, so you have to think these things through. You know, so there will be some true and false. It's about 15 multiple choice and 10 true and false, roughly that, give or take 1 or 2. You know, so majority of them will be multiple choice, but there will be some true and false. And of course, on a Scantron form, if you haven't done it before, A equals true, B equals false. That's how you do it. So again, in the allegory of the cave, we haven't looked at the allegory as a story about Plato's theory of reality. You know, so you don't need to worry much about this. I'm going to make sure you don't have questions on that. But I'll tell you, this one's false because it gets things the wrong way around. Basically, things in the cave represent the material things and their images in this world. The things outside the cave represent for Plato true reality, which he thinks is actually found in another realm that our reason and our minds can put us in touch with, but not our senses. And our souls were once there. You know, but we're not going to look at the allegory much as a story about Plato's theory of reality. And don't worry about 6. This is on there because sometimes we've gotten through Sartre, and I put you know, before test 1. There will not be any Jean-Paul Sartre questions on test 1. We will look at his philosophy, though, and it will be on test 2. There already is a PowerPoint on Sartre viewable to you. So again, get your Scantron form and bring your own number 2 pencil if you want to be absolutely sure that you have a good one. So let's see. Okay. So this is just slightly different from the printout that you have. Again, the allegory of the cave, myth of the cave, parable of the cave, 3 words that mean the same thing. The prisoner's situation. Well, we know they're in a cave, and they're prisoners. Where are they? They're in a cave, you know, just like General Grant is buried in Grant's tomb. You know, we wouldn't call it the allegory of the cave if they weren't in the cave. Right. But what are they wearing? I mean, you know, are they wearing, you know, shorts and sandals or? No, I mean, Pardon?
Are they wearing rags?
Well, probably, but besides that, what's important about?
Chains?
Yeah, chains. Yeah, around their feet and their neck. And why is it important that their head and necks are also chained?
They can't turn it, right?
Yeah, so they can't turn around and look at the real things casting the shadows in back of them. Now, again, I said you got to give Plato a grain of salt because you can say, well, even if I was chained, I could kind of turn around and look, but you know, we got to give him a little literary, you know, slack here. Because the point is, what do they see since their head and their necks are chained? Right, they can only see the shadows on the wall in front of them. So there's a fire behind them, and what's right behind them? Well, people carrying various things, statues, pots, objects that are casting shadows on the wall. But now, did the prisoners just get in the cave last week, or have they been there for a while? They've been there basically their whole life, yeah. And so, why is that important? Well, because for them, growing up, I mean, in their environment, the shadows are all they know. And so for them, the shadows, to go back to that, you know, question, the shadows are what they think are most real. Now, so who are the prisoners supposed to be like? Well, here's where Plato says, hey, look, this isn't just a story about some weird prisoners down in the cave. This is a story about us. The prisoners are supposed to be like us. We say, well, how are they like us? Well, it comes down to what these things represent. And the way we're looking at, Plato meant this two ways. He meant it to be a story about his technical theory of reality that had two tiers to it. What he called the sensible world, the world our senses put us in touch with, which is inside the cave, and the intelligible world, the world that is unseen, that our reason puts us in touch with, and that we, if we're good philosophers, will be in after our soul leaves our body. But we didn't look too much at that. We're interested in the other way Plato meant this, and as a story of what philosophy tries to do. And so the cave kind of represents what? I mean, the prisoners have been in a particular cultural environment here in the cave all their lives. Well, we've been in a particular environment, right? And as the prisoners are us, the shadows are kind of what they have beliefs about. It represents, you know, their beliefs and the objects of their beliefs. And how does that relate to us today? Well, you know, we grow up in a particular intellectual and cultural environment, and we soak up a lot of points of view, a lot of beliefs, just by being immersed in that particular environment. And many times these are beliefs that we have that we don't particularly question. This is what are referred to in the video I showed as our unreflective beliefs. That is, beliefs that we've soaked up but haven't really questioned. And these are kind of what the shadows are. And the chains are kind of the way that what holds us in. Now, before we look at the fire and the sun, do all the prisoners stay in the cave? Well, right, they don't. One of them is led up out of the cave. And is this an easy thing? Not really, right? Because his eyes have to adjust. And he finally sees the things that are illuminated by the fire and the fire itself when his eyes adjust. And at first, he doesn't want to believe that what he was shown and what he believed was real all his life was not, that he has a lot of false beliefs. Now, what does this signify? Well, the released prisoner stands for who? I mean, somebody who's taking a journey in philosophy, right? And the person bringing them up, forcing them to turn around and confront their worldview, their beliefs, is the philosophy teacher, the seasoned philosopher. We're going to see it also specifically represents Socrates. Pardon?
What did you say the release prisoner represent?
The philosophy student, the person who's new to philosophy, the person who's being led to confront their unreflective beliefs and say, well, okay, these are the beliefs I've grown up having, but now which ones stand critical scrutiny, critical analysis? Do I have good reasons for all of these beliefs, or are some of them just beliefs that I've soaked up that I really don't have good reasons for? And so the prisoner's confronted about his beliefs, and he goes all the way to not only see the fire and the objects that are cast by the fire, but he also goes outside. Now, outside the cave for Plato represents true reality. And these would be beliefs that survived philosophical analysis, true beliefs, the beliefs that we see outside the cave. And of course, there's a long adjusting process where he first can see only shadows and reflections of things. And then he finally sees the objects out there in the real world illuminated by the sun, and finally the sun itself. But at any rate, what happens? Does a prisoner just go on his merry way like the hero in an old Western movie, rides off into the sunset on his horse? After this, no. The prisoner goes what? Back to the cave. Now, his journey back to the cave is pretty quick. And his eyes, in other words, he gets down there with his old buddies before his eyes have really adjusted. Now, first of all, knowing what he knows, what passes for wisdom amongst his buddies is the ability to discern little subtleties in the shadows and knowledge of the shadows. But now he's encountered reality. He realizes the shadows are nothing but illusions, that his beliefs that the shadows were reality itself is a wrong belief. And so when he comes back into the cave, he doesn't value very much what they think is important, that is, knowing the shadows. And so basically, he doesn't think what they think is important is very important. But what about them? Well, here's this guy who's taken this trip that represents a journey in philosophy, but has it done him a lot of good, or has it been a negative? Well, they see that his eyes haven't adjusted, and he can't discern what they discern. He can't see all the subtleties in the shadows because his eyes haven't yet adjusted. You know, I mean, I was doing a lot of work on the house this summer, and you'd come in from the bright light, and sometimes you can't see things around. You know, if you have the shades down in the summer, you know, to make the room cooler, I mean, it takes a while for, you know, you can go stumble on something in your own house just because your eyes haven't adjusted from the bright sun. So at any rate, the point is, he comes back in, and his buddies think he's been messed up by this philosophy trip. And what do they say they would do to somebody if somebody else tried to take them on a similar trip? Yeah, they'd kill him. Now here specifically is a sideways reference to who? Yeah, to Socrates, who, remember, Plato only wrote this dialogue after Socrates' death and trial. One of the reasons Plato wrote things like the Apology, the Meno, the Crito, the Phaedo, these early dialogues, is to try to set the record straight on who Socrates was. Because people like Aristophanes had given a wrong portrait of Socrates. I should have something about Aristophanes in here. But remember, Aristophanes, the satirical playwright, tried to portray Socrates as a nature philosopher who's interested in getting out naturalistic explanations for phenomena in nature in ways that cut out the gods. So he also was portrayed as corrupting the youth by teaching them to be atheists or leading them after new gods. And Socrates, since he didn't have a real job, even though he was trained as a stonemason, was portrayed as kind of shiftless. You know, so all these were negatives in the way that Aristophanes portrayed Socrates. You know, and one of the reasons why Plato wrote his dialogues was to try to correct what he thought was a wrong picture. And Socrates, as his trial, even says this is a wrong picture of who I am, that I'm not preoccupied with the views of the nature philosophers. And also, remember in that video clip, one of the first things Socrates says in Aristophanes' play The Clouds is, Zeus, there is no Zeus. So, you know, he's portrayed as cutting the gods out of the picture, as teaching atheism. And Socrates tries to defend himself against this.
So would you say the fire and the sun represent?
I'm sorry, the what?
Fire and the sun.
Okay. Yeah, well, here again, the fire is kind of what gives light to our beliefs. The fire in the cave, the world in the cave is supposed to represent the world around us, and the fire is supposed to stand for the sun we see in this world. Now, here's where it gets tricky. The things outside the cave in the real world are meant to represent, in Plato's allegory, things in the intellectual world, in the world where there are perfect standards for what makes something a desk or a triangle or a chair, perfect standards for moral qualities like goodness and holiness and all, perfect standards for what makes something a triangle or a square. And Plato thinks that because these are eternally existing standards, in other words, it doesn't change what makes something a triangle, even though particular triangles come into and go out of existence. He thinks these perfect standards are eternal and have more reality than things in this world. You know, so the sun is supposed to represent a particular form. I'm not going to ask you this, but for him it's the form of the good or goodness itself, which everything else tries to achieve. So the Son stands for the form of the good in Plato's theory of reality. Anyway, but you can look at it as kind of the light of philosophy on our beliefs, is what critical analysis does to help us choose the right beliefs. But I wouldn't press this too hard. I'm not. So again, the world outside the cave is supposed to be the intellectual world. But we're mostly interested in Plato's story as a story about what philosophy does. So again, the attitude of the prisoners for the released prisoner is that this journey has messed him up. For Oedipus, we don't want to go through a lot of things, but fatalism basically is the view that, some events are planned out for us, and there's nothing we can do to escape a fate that has been set out for us. So who supposedly predicted the fates of Oedipus and Iacocsta was the anthropomorphic Greek gods. Remember, they find out their fate through the oracle at Delphi, who supposedly gave prophetic pronouncements for the god Apollo. So, what was Oedipus's fate, supposedly? That he would, kill his father and marry his mother, right? How does he try to escape it after he learns of it? Yeah. He leaves where he's gone to Delphi to consult the oracle of Delphi, which is who Phoebus was, the priestess. Well, it says he, but usually it's a priestess. At any rate, the point is, he goes back another way to, and does not return to Corinth, where he thinks his biological father is. But what happens on the way home? Well, he confronts somebody, has a quarrel, kills him at an intersection, but who's the person he kills on the way home? His actual biological father. In other words, he tries to escape his fate, but he does not succeed. He winds up fulfilling the prophecy. Now, Iacocsta tells Oedipus, hey, don't worry about all these prophecies. My husband had one that was prophesied for him, and it didn't come true. I mean, these prophecies are worthless. What was prophesied for her husband? That he would have a son who would kill him and raise a bad breed of men. And so how does Iacocsta's husband try to escape his fate? Pardon? Yeah, by binding the child, throwing it over a cliff, trying to, kill the child shortly after birth. But what happens? The father in Corinth, who he thinks is his biological father, is really the person who saved him by the cliff and raised him. So even though his biological father tries to escape his fate, the child lives. But Iacocsta thinks that he was killed instead by robbers along the route. That he was traveling, some robbers came upon him, and he was killed, with robbery as a motive. She doesn't know that what he actually did was meet his son, and was killed by his own son, And in various ways, Oedipus becomes Iacchos' husband for some things that he does. So the idea is that you can't escape a fate that was planned for you. Now, for the Greeks, their fate was planned out for them by anthropomorphic gods, that is, gods who are in the form of a human being. Whereas the law of karma says that there's a law in an impersonal universe that decides our fate, and that what we did in the past, whether it be good or bad, is going to have repercussions. What we did either in a past life, because belief in karma usually is linked with belief in reincarnation. And I mean, Hindus believe in karma, Buddhists do. But it's supposed to be an impersonal law that determines our fate for us. But again, here with and astrology fits into this, in that astrologers somehow know, what was determined for us by the position of the stars and planets at birth. But likewise, there's this belief that an impersonal universe has determined a fate for us, whether it be by when we were born and our horoscopes, or a law of karma. And so fatalism then again is a view that we have a set of events determined for us. Now, for whatever reason, I repeat some things in this. Obviously, the practical consequences of the problem of free will are that it links up with the problem of moral responsibility and ultimately legal responsibility. Now, we just did hard determinism recently, but again, predestination, we did not study very much, but the problem of predestination has to do with an aspect of God called divine omniscience, that God foreknows everything. And the issue that divides the believers in free will from those who believe that God has predestined everything for us is the issue of whether God's foreknowledge entails predestination. Jonathan Edwards says yes. He's a Calvinist. He believes that the only way God can know everything we're going to do this afternoon is if God has already planned it out to the slightest detail. It's like you, as the author of a play, knowing what's going to happen in Act 2 because you've already written it out. And so, but believers in free will in the Judeo-Christian camp, the Arminians, which would include Catholics like Augustine, believe that even if God knows everything we're going to do, it does not mean that God has planned any of it out. That it's still compatible with our making genuinely free choices. And so Augustine thinks we need free choice, especially that we might be accountable for our actions before God. But we saw in the selection there's a problem that's raised in that if we have free will and it's somehow a gift from God, and it's and the only way we could do something bad or wrong, the only way we could engage in a sinful action is by using God's gift of free will. Well, if we couldn't do anything bad unless we used our free will, then why does God hold us responsible for sinning, for doing bad things? And obviously, to a Christian, this is an important issue. And of course, what's Augustine's reply? How does he get God off the hook? Well, basically in saying that God had a purpose in giving us the gift of free will, and it wasn't that we use it any way we wanted to, but God gave us free will so we would use that free will to choose to do good things with it. If we, on the other hand, abuse God's gift of free will and use it in a way He did not intend, that is, to sin, to do evil, then it is we who are responsible for the evil that we do and not God. So this is how He kind of gets God off the hook in that selection from Augustine. Okay, well, we've done the scientific problems of free will most recently. But again, hard determinism is an incompatibilist view. It says that our having enough free will for moral and legal responsibility is incompatible with the view that the laws of nature determine everything for us. So how does it relate the past to the future? Well, it says that a unique past determines a unique future. That is, that all of the causes that led up to your action in the past means you're going to have only one future that's possible for you, that the laws of nature determine your choice. And so, if that's the case, then why say we have any personal responsibility? Now, we only, so this is the whole box view, that we're not free for even 1 second. But you say, wait a second. I can deliberate. I can choose between coffee or tea. Why aren't my choices free? And you can't predict what I'm going to do this afternoon. Well, of course, the answer for the hard determinist, and remember Laplace is a hard determinist as well, is that we're only kidding ourselves. It's an illusion for us to think that we're free, that we're really never free for an instant. The laws of nature determine everything. And the only reason we can't predict what we'll do is the causes working on to determine our actions are so complicated that ordinary persons don't know enough to be able to predict our actions. But in principle, our actions could be predicted if we knew enough about the causes leading up to them. But who does know enough? Well, somebody like Laplace's demon, who has all of the knowledge of all the atoms in the universe at a particular time and can predict where those atoms will be at any future time. So if those atoms represent the choices you're going to make, then a supernatural entity like Laplace's demon could, in principle, predict what you'll choose to do in the future. And this would not be possible if it weren't for the case that the laws of nature determine everything. So hard determinism is an incompatibilist position, says we have no free will, and we don't have enough free will for moral responsibility. That our having that is incompatible with the claim that the laws of nature determine everything. Soft determinism and compatibilism mean the same thing. They both say there's a way to fit our having enough free will for moral and legal responsibility in with the claim that the laws of nature determine everything for us. And basically it's that they determine that free actions and the ones we're responsible for are the ones that we do from some inner motive, like a desire, a want, a belief. Coerced actions, actions that are forced on us from some external source, are unfree actions for the compatibilists. So they say, if I did what I wanted to do, even if the laws of nature determine my wants and my desires, I still acted freely and in a way that I can be held legally and morally responsible for the compatibilist. If I was coerced, if somebody had a gun to my head, then I'm not legally and morally responsible for what I do. Yeah, go ahead. That's an unfree action for a compatibilist, a forced, coerced action. Mm-hmm.
So who exactly predicted the fates of Oedipus and Iacocca?
Oh, well, okay. They found out these fates from the oracle at Delphi, who supposedly spoke for the god Apollo. So we'd have to say the gods, and specifically Apollo, would have been. But they leave it open as to whether or not there might have been other Greek gods involved. But certainly Apollo would be a main one, because it's Apollo who was supposed to speak through the oracle at Delphi, and both Iacocca's former husband and Oedipus, they both consult the oracle on their fate. Okay, bring a number 2 pencil if you want to make sure you have a good one, but I will have some. Make sure you pick up an 882 Scantron form. Your essay is due and on time Friday. If you have it today and want to turn it in, I'll accept it, but it's totally up to you. There's no bonus for getting it in early. So take care. See you Friday. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sure. Mm-hmm. You're Kavina Queen. Okay, Queen. Okay. Have it. Okay.
I have a question.
I'm sorry. Katie.
King. K-I-N-G.
Kate. Okay. Very good. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
What's this TC thing stand for?
Oh, traditional compatibilism. In other words, it's the view of compatibilism that was covered in the video. I used a text that made a distinction between that and another more complicated, more modern version of it.
So what's the 2 conditions for free? Where are you get to that?
Well, okay. Well, basically, that we act from an inner psychological motive, and that we're not coerced externally. So a free action is one that I do from some inner choice that's motivated by a desire, a want, a belief, you know. An unfree action is one that's coerced from the outside. So that it not be coerced, and that I do it from an inner motive. Yeah.
So the 2 conditions is free and unfree?
Yeah, in other words, if those conditions are fulfilled, the action was from some inner motive and it was not coerced from the outside. It wasn't somebody forced me to do, then that was a free action.
Okay.
You know. So, okay.
I did my essay, but I wanted to change one thing in here. I did it on number 1, the key, but I had a change to make, so I'll bring it back Friday. But I was just going to let you know that when I was doing
Okay.
studying, thinking about it, I had already, and I put in my essay that it was just like Socrates being, similar to the Greek.
Yeah, yeah.
And went down into the cave and tried to enlighten his fellow man.
Right.
And they put him to death. So I didn't want you to think that I wanted
Yeah,
to change
okay.
it just because you said it.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I'll bring it back
No,
on
that's
Friday.
fine. That's nothing wrong.
I have one change.
Okay, if you want to edit it and bring it, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Hope you feel better.
Yeah.